Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Merete, for inviting us and for the warm welcome from the whole Overgaden staff. We're very pleased to be here today. We are running an independent space in Zurich, Switzerland that has existed for some 2.5 years. We are dedicated to showing process-like methods in artistic practice, be it fragments of research or also sensitive forms and ideas. This is a counterspace. Just to situate it a bit spatially, we are located in a former bank. So if you're wondering, there are banks in Switzerland that are not being used. This was an office space that we have transformed. We rent temporarily, and we are located by one of the most busiest urban streets in the city of Zurich, where 60,000 cars are zooming by every day. We wish we could have that kind of spectatorship in our space. We're going to be showing a selected ABC, pointing to some issues and various questions related to ethics in art making, art deception, and its system. A is for Apache dance. I'm going to read you a passage that goes into what Tom Wolfe describes as the Apache dance in the art world. The excerpt comes from The Painted Word, which was published in 1975. The Apache dance was a highly popular dance in the 1900s, which was said to reenact a violent discussion between a pimp and a prostitute. By the First World War, the process was already like what in the Paris clip joints of the day was known as an Apache dance. The artist was like the female in the act, stamping her feet, yelling defiance one moment, feigning indifference the next, resisting the advances of her pursuer with absolute contempt, more thrashing about, more rake-a-cheek fury, more yelling and carrying on, until finally, with one last mighty and marvelously ambiguous shriek, pain, ecstasy, she submits, puff, 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 puff. How you do it, my boy, and the house lights rise and everyone, tout le monde, applauds. So he was describing a little bit about the 70s New York scene, and Wolfe claimed that in order to be a successful artist, the artist had to hover between the bohemian life and being with the restricted elite of the curators, museum institutions, collectors, and critics. Today, what boundaries do cultural producers have to traverse or stay within? Do we continuously find ourselves in a kind of wild Apache dance? The avant-garde, the producers of creative dark matter, through time seem inevitably to be finding itself assimilating into a mainstream institutionalized art world. Being autonomous, independent, or using terms like off-space, can suggest a polarizing view of us versus them. And it could be indicative of having a barely visible and inflexible and potentially disadvantaged position.
B is for blockbuster exhibition. Oh, sorry. B is for blockbuster exhibition. C, counter monument. So the counter monument it's called the Hamburger Monument against war and fascism and for peace. It was built in 1986 in Hamburg, and one of the interesting aspects was that every year it was low down until it disappeared. It's called also the disappearing monument. We all know big monuments. They are there to impose a certain idea about history and regulate our habitual way to think. This monument in this piece go against the idea of reducing viewers to a passive spectators. This work is engaging receivers to produce memory as form of capacity of imagine, to project, to visualize, and to have an individual choice. In 2014 we showed a piece at Counterspace. It was a sound piece. It was the first exhibition for the new location. So the space is quite big at the moment with 200 square meters. And the public went in and they were writing to me and telling me, "Oh, Angelo, it's a great space, but where is the art piece?" So somehow we are kind of used to sing in a certain way when we go to exhibition.
D is for developments. E is for entertainment society. F is for Fahrenheit for refinement.
So Fahrenheit, François Truffaut, 1966. I would like to show you a short sequence of this movie. As really short introduction, I think most of you should know the movie or the book. The movie describes two kinds of groups. On the one hand, we have a disciplinary society that is not allowed to read books. On the other side, we have the book people that don't know, they read book, but more they are becoming the living body and store the artistic vision and the desires. Sorry.
Come on now, madam. We're going to burn the house.
No.
What do you want, martyrdom?
I want to die as I've lived.
Oh, you must have read that in there. Now, look, I'm not going to ask you again. Are you going?
These books were alive. They spoke to me.
Go ahead. That's enough. Come on, madam. You've got 10 seconds. Fabian, 10 count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
9 11s are 99. 9 12s are 108. 9 13s are 117.
She can't stay
9
here.
14s
Well, she refuses to leave.
26.
She must be forced to leave.
15s are 135.
Look out! Back there. Open up.
So, why are the firefighters destroying the books? To read a book is an individual activity that activates uncontrollable consequences, like desires. And this is in danger that could instabilize a society. The book were alive, they spoke to me. The old woman understood that the economy of the book is not about the financial value of buying and selling books, but about the spiritual value. The book people are related to this kind of economy that not relate to the object world of the book, but to the dynamic of transmission and exchange. The book people are a receiver. They are really a symbol of free exchange, free from the object world. The burning scene is underlining the fact that the object itself is useless. Important is memorized, embodied, and impersonal knowledge. The job of an audience is also about to actualize the book or the matrix that an artist is presenting to us. Or is the public expecting to have it delivered at home on a silver plate?
G is for game. Here is the big five game animals of the commercial art world. The art newspaper published an article earlier this year which showed some concerning statistics. Analyzing nearly 600 exhibitions in the US, they found that nearly 1/3 of major solo exhibitions held in US museums between 2007 and 2013 featured artists from these 5 galleries. Robert Storr, the Dean of the Yale School of Art, noted in this respect that curators are abdicating and delegating their responsibilities to more adventurous gallerists, who seem in many cases to be bolder and more curious than their institutional counterparts. How to keep away from having this kind of tunnel vision, or are there any ethical ways of preventing this? H is for hybridity. I for increased competition in players. J is for joint efforts. K is for key actors. L is for longevity. M is for manifestations. N is for non-profit. O is for the Old Testament. Part 1, the story of Babylon. The whole world had one language and a common speech. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them." Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one, people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other."
P is for process.
At Counterspace, we work with singular positions, artists in particular, as I said, with research-oriented practices, and mostly producing new works. We deem it important to encourage a reflection on how artists collect information, formalize observations, or test out certain paths of inquiry. We often find ourselves in a space where we don't know exactly how the artist's research will evolve.
Q is for queuing. Akademia Rucho, Poland. Queuing going out from the shop, 97.7. It was a performance group that I discovered when I was doing a residence in Poland. A long line of people is waiting. I suppose they want to buy something. On the very beginning, there were a small group of performers who went in front of the line, and suddenly people who were passing by were going behind the line. So the people were waiting for nothing. They even didn't know for what they were waiting. But they did it. So there's an interesting element that I find quite, for me, interesting, is the fact that this performance group is somehow using a social structure, an everyday social structure, in order to say something to the public. To integrate an artwork in the social structure of everyday life is a challenge. R is for reserved rights.
Every Tuesday at Counterspace, we host a discussion session that is called Theory Tuesdays, and it's organized by an artist called Philip Matesic. It's basically where we talk about art theory and drink beers. I got to know the document Artists' Reserved Rights Transfer and Sales Agreement during one of these sessions. In 1971, Salsi Galab, the well-known conceptual art dealer and curator, set up this file with a lawyer. This was an attempt to make a contract that would better protect the authorial and the economic rights of artists when reselling their work. So partly legal document, partly manifesto, it contains many controversial and progressive conditions, though it was never really applied. The contract was to be signed by the owner of the future piece, and then for every resale of the work, the artist would get 15% of the increased value. It also had certain conditions like the artist being able to borrow back a work for 2 months every 5 years, so he could just take it to himself. What if such measures were in some way to be taken today, making collectors responsible for the future reattribution of funds back to artists, or maybe even producers who were involved in producing the piece? Was it only disregarded due to the bureaucratic hassles that could have been involved?
S is for Sendung mit der Maus. Mouse TV show. So I would like to show you my first experience with art. I think it was my first experience with art. It's based on a comic series that I used to see when I was a child. Die Sendung mit der Maus. Good. It might be someone if you will know it. It's from the early 90s, so even later or before, but I could not find the sound piece to that. But we will look at this small scene and we can imagine how the sound could be. I have to start it like this. As you could see, the mouse and the elephant were confronted with, let's say, it's a public sculpture or an art piece. There was a kind of description, it could be, and the elephant was quite confused about it. He didn't know how to use it. And suddenly they got an idea, they rebuilt it, and they could use it, and they were happy. Public art that is not integrated in the value structure of people in order to use don't work. In 2013, we also built a public sculpture from a Chinese artist. The sculpture is called Stage of Meditation from Ensuing. We produced it in Switzerland. It's 4 meters of 2 meters is
2 tons.
2 tons. In order not to destroy the ground, because in Zurich, we are from Switzerland, Zurich, and there are a lot of restriction about public space. And there was a risk to build this big ball, because we didn't know how the public will react to it, or how the public will use it. We didn't know it. So we put it there, and after a while, we were observing it from far away, sometimes 1 year, we realized that the people were starting to entering the entries, and they went on this kind of chair. And if you are there and you start to scream, you will hear yourself 10 or 20 times louder. So it's a kind of echo effect in this ball. That means that suddenly people were starting to scream there inside. So for a really small moment, the people were changing the logic how to react in public spaces. So they start to scream, what they usually would not do. And you can lie inside, you can have a picnic, and so on. T is for Tower of Babel. Part 2. The Lord confused the language of the whole world. From the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. The Babylons wanted to use the language as a tool of power, to expand their own ideas and ideology over the world. According to the philosopher Gadamer, the situation corresponds to the current idea of using the institution and bureaucracy to suppress the variety of language and also deliver exchange of vision. I mean, yesterday we had also a presentation of institution, how they are working against this idea to get used or and so on. Where do we find ourselves today when such sites appear to be assimilated by various forces, including land-scale economy transformation, gentrification, urban development, city marketing, and the professionalization of the art system?
V is for void left by things. In 2012, artist Vittorio Santoro created the work The Void Left by Things. It involved the participation of the staff of the Fondation Ricard, an institution where he was having a solo exhibition. The artist asked individual questions and answers to people of the staff, be it a gallery assistant or a technician, and then wrote them down on a piece of paper that he pasted in the walls of the exhibition space. Then prior to the actual opening, he ripped off these sheets of paper where you then only could see the remnants of this exchange. Questions with the relationship between the act of creation and reception, and highlights the participatory aspect of art. This example made me think of American sociologist Howard Becker, who wrote an article in 1974 called Artist Collective Action. In it, he presents the idea that art communities are based on a cooperative activity of many people, not just a singular person. He used a word from the military and called these people the support personnel. These support personnel are many times invisible, but they are crucial players in cultural production. At Counterspace, as we are an independent space, we are publicly funded, also privately funded. We also try and sell work to go back into the financial infrastructure, but our 5-person team are unpaid. We count on production collaborators, be it an artist who needs to work in a wood shop, or we get favorable conditions from people who lend us materials, sound equipment. So it is the co-workers, the artists, these helpers, these friends who make it possible, who make us avoid this kind of void.
So, W is Y. X marks the spot. Y is yearly planning. So, I hope you enjoyed our small ABC with different ideas that we tried to pointing out. Thanks so much.